People of the internet!
Now, practically speaking, tell me what you're doing and how often you're called on. So, the corporate world has become rife with DEIs, but DIEs, how I like to phrase it, because I'm not very happy about it. The notion of this catchphrase, diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Mm-hmm. And there are training programs everywhere to hypothetically increase people's awareness of those and their proper behavior. And I think the evidence that those programs work is extraordinarily weak, and there's a fair bit of evidence that they're actually counterproductive, which I find more compelling, but perhaps not. But that's the practical landscape for your activities at the moment. Is that correct? You're working essentially as a consultant as well as a writer?
Primarily as a consultant. I do some writing here and there, but it's primarily consulting. And people can basically either enroll in our online course, which we have, or companies can bring us in to facilitate workshops that elucidate the essence of the course, or kind of serve as an appetizer or teaser to the course.
Okay, so how are you marketing that? How successful are you? Why do you think it works? Practical questions, because there's obviously a huge market for this. So why your thing, and why are you sure that you're not doing harm? Just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to answer the first few questions first. So we've actually had no outbound marketing strategy to date. Everything has kind of been organic. So basically, I've been interviewed by a number of different publications and on a number of different podcasts. And those are the things that drive people to discover the theory of enchantment. There's been no paid marketing outside of, just me showing up on a podcast to talk about these ideas. And one of the other drivers, so we have that piece, but the other piece is that a lot of companies are bringing in these more toxic diversity and inclusion programs, and they're wreaking havoc in the workplace. They're actually causing...
Justify that claim, because that's a pretty radical claim that they're wreaking havoc. Those are fighting words, let's say. Yeah. So why do you believe that? What's your evidence for that?
So I have been told by folks on demo calls that we have with potential clients, I've been told these stories about how they bring in very specific diversity and inclusion programs where people are encouraged to segregate themselves based upon skin color. Their lived experiences are assumed because of their skin color. And this ends up fostering a kind of resentment on the part of people of all different races and all different ethnic backgrounds. And it also ends up fostering a kind of animosity between peoples of different backgrounds and ethnicities. And so then these companies end up looking for a kind of balm or kind of remedy to actually fix that problem. And
BALM bomb, not DOMB bomb.
No. A softer version.
Yes, exactly.
But they're looking for some kind of medicine to fix the situation that they unwittingly brought in and didn't, were totally oblivious to.
Okay, so that's your typical experience, is that you're being brought in after the DEI process has resulted in an unpleasant outcome.
Yes, it's either that or an individual or a group of individuals in an organization. They're being told that this is the way to do diversity and inclusion, but it's not sitting well with them. It's not, they feel intuitively that something's off, that doesn't speak to them. And then they go out and search for alternative approaches. And then they may come across theory of enchantment.
Okay. So I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned about the DEI process, the idea that it's another one of these propositions that's worthy of investigation, the validity of lived experience. Now, you would say, well, are you an authority? Are you an unquestionable authority on the nature of your lived experience? And the answer to that is yes and no. It's the same as those other questions that we discussed, because there's obviously a domain of subjective experience that you have unique access to, about which, in some sense, I can say nothing. Like, if I see that you're in pain, if you tell me you're in pain, I can decide whether I believe that or not. I can decide whether or not that is a credible claim as far as I'm concerned, but I cannot tell ever exactly the nature of your experience. And so, in some sense, you are an expert, an incontrovertible expert on some aspects of your experience. So that part of the claim is valid. The question is, well, what's the universalizing significance of that? And so just because it's true for you doesn't mean it's true for everyone. Just because it's true for you doesn't mean that it's true for all people who share any particular element of your immutable characteristics. All of the rest of that is questionable. But a lot of these claims fly because, well, they're true in some sense. You could say, well, is the US structurally racist? Well, it was set up for the benefit of the people who set it up fundamentally. Yeah. So in some sense, all cultures are set up to benefit, particularly the people who set them up. And then if there's other people who come in, well, they have a harder time of it. And is that structurally racist? It's like, well, yes and no. But the no is important to assess as well as the yes, right? To get an even-handed take on these and also to find out how universal this is or how particular it is to that particular country. Like, all countries are set up for the benefit of a relatively homogenous group, because otherwise it's not a country. Everyone, if it isn't homogenous, people aren't playing the same game, right? So the fundamental problem is homogeneity versus heterogeneity. That's a really deep problem, because the problem is, well, how do we all get along together and play nice, like children, civilized children in the playground, while simultaneously being quite different from one another at all sorts of levels of analysis? It's a huge problem.
Well, this is the essence of the American project, which is ultimately a conundrum, right? Because our motto is e pluribus unum, out of many one, which is actually an incredibly difficult thing to accomplish, given the human condition. And so I would say that America is different, quite different from many other countries in the sense that it does hold this up as its motto, as its ideal to which it aspires to. But it also simultaneously has this very storied history of not just having a homogenous culture in the typical sense of the word, but of course also in perpetuating, systemic cruelty against the other. in this case, speaking particularly of African Americans. So you have these two warring trends or histories within the American system, which makes this question of how to have these civilized children playing together a deeper question and a more difficult question to solve, because America holds itself up as having this model, or having this ideal rather, of out of many, one.
Shout out to Dr. Jordan Peterson. Of course, what you didn't know about DEI. I clicked onto this video, of course, because I was just talking about the article that came from the New York Post that spoke about the MLB, Major League Baseball, removing DEI from their copy, I guess you could say, from their marketing on their careers website due to Trump's executive order. And I was just speaking about, like, again, is DEI a good thing? Is DEI a bad thing? I don't know how it became something that people were on the fence of. So I see a conversation between Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I don't know this other young lady's name. Chloé Valdary, looks like. And her role looks to be an advocate, to be speaking on certain things when it comes to corporate spaces, this whole program, whatever the case is. So I like listening in. Of course, one of the best ways to learn is to listen to people who are smarter than you speak. I've learned a lot of insight from just listening on a lot of things, man. Dr. Jordan Peterson, you got Lex Friedman, you got Andrew Huberman. These are all guys that I'm a fan of, that you see. Of course, I'm subscribed to on their channels, man. The guys that are just knowledgeable in their field. So you could get a little bit of diverse perspectives, of course, and I like that they are mature enough, of course, to have opposing views but still hold constructive conversations. I think that's a skill set that a lot of people don't have, especially in our culture as well today now. Also, just like on the internet as well, too, people sometimes are very adamant about their beliefs, and they kind of shut their ideas off, or they shut the opposing ideas of other people who don't see the things the same way they do. They shut those off and feel like, okay, well, their way is better, whatever the case is, or, they know better than them. So I'm glad Dr. Peterson, of course, presented his platform to have a constructive conversation, though he has opposing views to DEI. Of course, you heard him mention that he's just not a fan of it, or whatever the case is, this, that, and the other. But he did admit that there are indeed certain experiences that he can't speak to. Right? We can't speak to each other's lived experiences, as they say. Right? There's certain experiences that I've gone through that you wouldn't be able to discredit. There's certain experiences that you've lived through, of course, that I myself wouldn't be able to discredit as well too. And I think that's where the area is that people can listen. Because again, I can't discredit you off of things that you've been through, whatever the case is, this, that, and the other. But that's just my take. I deem Dr. Peterson as somebody that's wise, right? And again, I like that he had the ability to hear this young lady out. Of course, he saw two opposing views. I don't know, man. Again, like I'm still on the side of the fence that feels like DEI started off as a good thing. I just don't know when it got villainized. I don't know when DEI got villainized, man. I don't. I thought that it started off as a good thing. That's funny, hey man. But hey man, we could have opposing views and still be cordial. That's the whole essence of this channel, man. Being able to have opposing views, but still cordial, man. Like, we're still humans at the end of the day. We're all trying to figure it out. You may not agree with the things that I believe. I may not agree with the things that you believe, but I'm still a human. You're still a human. You still need to eat food and get sunlight the same way I need to eat food and get sunlight. You need the basic necessities of life the same way I need the basic necessities of life. So I think there's a lot of commonalities that we still share with each other that should still allow us to be cordial with one another, man, even if we have opposing views on the topic of DEI and the likes thereof.